All right, as we continue this study, we're talking about the causes of separation and divorce in the home. We're talking about unfaithfulness in marriage, especially sexual unfaithfulness, and how it causes separation and divorce between a husband and a wife. As we were saying a moment ago, men are moved by visual things. They are moved by sight. In the pornography industry, 95% of all pornography is geared toward men. Very little, if any, is geared toward women. Men are moved by a picture. They're moved by a videotape. They're moved by a visual of a woman. That's what affects a man. A woman, on the other hand, a picture can't touch her. A picture can't communicate to her. A picture can't hold her. So therefore, she's not going to be as excited about the picture as she would a person who can actually be there for her when she needs him. Now again, if men are moved by sight, then it's very important to understand that Proverbs chapter 6 especially talks about being taken in by a woman's eyelids, being taken in by what you see in her. So women, let's talk about the marriage for just a moment. If sight is important to your husband, now we all know that the day's going to come that the hair's going to get gray and the face is going to get wrinkled and the muscles are going to get droopy and we're not going to be as strong and healthy as we used to be. But see, real love goes through all of that. Real love will endure to the very end when both of you have to go home and be with Jesus. But I'm talking about in the present. Let's say you're a young married couple. Let's say you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s. If you know that sight is important to your husband, and obviously he was attracted to you or he would have never married you, then it's important that you do your best to make yourself look good. Do what your husband likes. If he likes your hair a certain way, keep it that way. It may not be the way you prefer it, but if he enjoys it, he likes it, keep it that way. If he likes for you to dress a certain way and he thinks you look good in certain colors but don't look good in others, well, you may disagree with him, but do what he likes. Husbands, do the same thing with your wife. Even though she may not be as moved by sight, she still wants you to look good and look well. Now, I'm going to say something here, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but yet it's true. A lot of times after people have been married for years, and we all can relate to this if you're married, you put on weight. And sometimes as the years progress, you put on more and more and more weight. Now, wives, it's very important that if your husband is bothered by the fact that you are somewhat overweight, don't take offense at that. Don't take offense if he says to you, honey, you may want to lose the weight, or honey, you may want to back down. Don't get, what do you mean? I'll do what I want to do. I've seen women react that way when their husband deals with it. Now, don't bug her about it. But at the same time, wife, you need to understand that your husband wants you healthy and he wants you to look good. And so you need to take that to heart and do your best if he's bothered. And I know some men that are not bothered by the weight of their companion. And some wives are not bothered by the weight of their husband. And the main thing is, if you're happy with the way you are, and if you're happy with one another, stay that way. But at the same time, you don't want Satan bringing a temptation into your companion like your husband's life, because maybe you won't control your weight or you show no interest in your physical body. I'll tell you one thing, the enemy will bring Miss Prissyfoot into his life somewhere along the way and bring mental thoughts into his mind if you don't observe what he's trying to tell you. The point is, if husbands are moved by sight, if men are moved by sight, then the wives need to do their best to make themselves look good to please their husband. They may even want to find out from him, what do you like? How do you like me to look? How can I look better in your eyes? Make him happy. And if you make him happy, you'll be happy and your relationship will be stronger. And I say the same thing to the husband. Listen to your wife. If she likes a certain thing, do it. If she doesn't like a certain thing, don't do it even though you'd like to. Keep the relationship strong in that aspect. Now, because men are moved by sight and women are moved by words. Now, when I talk about words, women, and again, this is studies which have been done, are moved by three things. One, they're moved by words, they're moved by position, and they're moved by power. This is why I was saying a moment ago that Solomon was, Mr. Macho. He was the perfect man because he had all these things. He had the words, what wisdom he had. He had position. He was a king. He had power because he had great wealth. And so the women are just pouring into this man's life. See, women are moved by power, position, and by words. You'll find out that when you talk about a minister who has fallen into a sexual sin with the opposite sex, most of the time it began in counseling because a woman opened up her heart, she opened up her feelings, she opened up her problems about her marriage, her relationship, and the minister's over there hearing this, and he's giving her attention, and he's saying he's going to pray for her, and she says to herself, boy, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a husband like this? But he really cares about me. He's concerned. Boy, it would be good to have a spiritual husband. So she comes back for another counseling session, and then pretty soon she's telling him how much she appreciates it. Oh, I wish I had a husband like you. Well, the next thing you know, feelings begin, and one thing leads to another, and then you know the end result. So women are moved by words, position, and power. Now, husbands, again, it's very important that we understand this, that if women are moved by our words, they are moved to the good and to the bad by what we say. In other words, bad words, criticism, cutting words can get into their spirit and wound them because they are affected by words. Good words, positive words, healthy words, words of compassion and love can move them for good towards you. And this is one thing that we need to understand. Men are geared to where they could get in a heated argument with somebody at work, come to work the next day, pat them on the back, and go hunting with them on Saturday. My wife has told me, she says, this is one thing I do not understand between men and women. She said, you men can say something or get upset and turn around and say, I'm sorry, and act like nothing ever happened and go on with it. She says, but we women cannot do that. We hold on to what was said. Now, again, this is something I don't understand. My wife doesn't understand. I don't guess anybody I've ever talked to understands this, but it's true in that when words are spoken, if you get in a fuss with your companion, for example, you'll find out that she'll hold the grudge for a week and you're over it in an hour. And women need to understand that the husband is made, for whatever reason, that he can just get over these things, but the woman is made to where she can't. And husbands and wives need to understand this about each other. It is the way that they are made. It isn't just your husband that's acting that way, or it isn't just your wife. Boy, she holds grudges. I can't believe it. Most women are made that way. Now, again, when I'm teaching this tape, I can't speak for all women. I can't speak for all men. This is a general study which has been made to show this. So it's important to understand that we guard what we say with our mouth. Look at the book of Proverbs. It constantly talks about us. Power of life and death are in the tongue. And it's true. You can heal or you can kill with the tongue. You can touch somebody's spirit, destroy somebody's spirit with the tongue. So words. Men, be careful what you say with your words, because words have an impact on your companion. And if you're single, you need to understand that as well. So marital unfaithfulness causes separation and divorce. Now, I'll talk about something a little later on with that. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the third one because this would have to deal with each individual home and family. The third reason for divorce is financial stress. Really, a young couple that's married, and people get married at different ages, they get married at different times. My wife has told me for years, she says, I'm so thankful that you were established in the ministry when we were married. When I was married, when I was about 23 years of age, I'd been traveling for about 5 years full time. And I had already gone through the real rough time of the ministry. They put me in cold church basements where the heat didn't work. They put me up in attics and where I couldn't even walk. I had to walk straight because the roof slanted on either side. They put me, oh goodness sakes, almost starved me to death in some places. So I had gone through 5 years of just all of this, just almost depressing traveling by myself. So when I was married, our ministry was established, and I think that was good for us. I think if I would have married when I was 18, 19 years old, it would have been very hard on my companion because it was hard on me. So when you are planning on getting married, you should really think about it. You shouldn't let your passions and your feelings and the fact of it's better to marry than to burn. Well, you have to prepare yourself for your family, for your home, for your companion. And the biggest thing is knowing that you are financially stable and financially ready. Now, if you wait till you have enough money to get married, you're never going to get married because you never feel like you have enough to live on. And many of you know what I'm talking about. But you've got to make sure is your job stable? Is she going to work? Do you have enough money, sir, to take care of both of you? Will she have to work? Does she have a job? Will she be able to provide? How's your work schedule going to be? Is she going to have to work a night shift and you work a day shift? Is that going to be detrimental to your marriage? In many cases, it is. I know ministers who preach and teach that the woman should never work, but in the society which we're living in today, it's very different than it used to be. And I'm not one that feels that way. I do feel like if you have children, if you're a working mother, you've got to really spend more quality time with your children than perhaps the woman who does not work, who's around her children all the time. But anyway, financial stress. Don't go out and buy things that you don't need. Don't go out and buy something and then turn around, a month later and sell it for half the price you bought it for. Buy the things you need first. Buy the necessities of life first. Set aside some income for investment. Don't forget, pay tithes, give in the offerings. This is God's plan to continually bless and prosper you, is you supporting the work of God. A lot of couples, you'd be surprised who don't involve themselves in that because they say, well, I can't make it financially. Well, the reason you're not making it is because you're not doing what the Word of God told you to do when it comes to sowing and giving. You need to get some tapes and books on giving or sit under some ministries who understand that spiritual principle and see how God moves towards you with special blessings when you've been obedient to Him. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that other than to tell you that is one of the areas where people often end up separating in their marriage or end up in divorces because of financial stress. The fourth reason is, and we talked about sexual unfaithfulness a moment ago, is sexual incompatibility. People who do not give themselves to one another. Now, this is something that again, couples need to understand. And I've dealt with this before in churches, and I've had men especially tell me, preacher, this should have been preached years ago in the church. Well, years ago in the church, you couldn't mention sex. It was a 4-letter word. It was a dirty word. You couldn't mention physical relationship. But the sad part is that while preachers were not preaching it because people thought it was a dirty word, they thought you can't talk about that behind the pulpit. What happened was the enemy came in and started separating our homes, our families, division, and people were separating and didn't know what the root problem was and just separated anyhow. And so a lot of homes and families were lost that may have stayed together, probably could have stayed together had they got counseling or the right teaching. Sexual incompatibility, what do I mean by that? Well, there are different things, and again, let's go back to the male and female, because you can be married for years and not understand how a woman works, how a woman operates. And you can be married for years and not understand how a man operates. Now, it's not just my husband's this way, my wife's that way. It's just that there are certain biological ways that men and women work and how they operate. And when we understand this, we can prepare each other better. We can put up with each other with more compassion. And let me talk about that for just a moment. The moods of a woman, and you know what I mean by moods, the ups and downs of a woman are based on her are in her because of the biological way God created her. The moods of a man are often based on his physical sexual drive that he has. Now, I'm going to explain this to you. Some of you may already be aware of this, but if you're not, this will help you if you'll listen to it. Every 28 days, a woman's physical body goes through a cleansing or a cycle. I've heard people make jokes of this. It's really nothing to joke about, but at the same time, it is a little humorous when you think about the different, I guess you'd say, moods that some women, again, this is not all, can go through during this time. For 14 days, one guy said it's wine and roses. I mean, she's the greatest person in all the world. You're so happy to be married to her. You never could find anything like that. But for 14 days, she can be, at times, a different personality. You look at her and you're saying to yourself, did I marry her? Did I marry this? Oh, my goodness, what's going on? Now, I said this publicly one time, had a few people get offended, but a lot of people laughed at it and they said, that's really funny. There is a week out of the month when a woman goes through her monthly purification, or what we call her monthly cycle. And there are 4 seasons in the year, and literally a woman's life in her during that 28-day period is compared to this. And it's so neat how God made the 4 seasons, that He made these 4 different weeks in the life of the female. You have the spring, which the flowers are blooming, the birds are chirping. It's wonderful. You have the summer, which fruit is growing on the tree, things are happening. You have the fall, which you begin to perceive a little bit of change. The leaves are beginning to change, the air is beginning to change, and then you have winter when it gets real cold. Now, in the Old Testament, now this is in the Bible, this is funny, it says that when a woman is going through this 7-day period of her cycle, the husband is to put her away for those 7 days. Now, in the Old Testament, this was very serious because the woman was ceremonially unclean for 7 days. She couldn't go out in public. She couldn't touch anybody. Anything she touched became ceremonially unclean. So that's the purpose of putting her away, is that according to the law of Moses, she would be unclean and everything she touched would be unclean for those 7 days. Now, one man told me, he said, I know why that's in the Bible. He said, during those 7 days or so, he said, I can't even live with my wife and I feel like putting her away. Well, I don't think that's why that's in the Bible. That was there because of a purification law of the Old Testament. But at the same time, this is what a husband needs to understand. You know that time is coming up, and you have to be more sensitive to her needs. You have to be more compassionate. You have to realize her body is going through some changes. She feels things in her that she does not enjoy. And so men have to be much more compassionate during that time. Now, I'll tell you something else that I have learned, and that is this. You need to do your best to plan vacations or special events, if possible, around the good time. and not around the time when she's experiencing this. One guy told me, he says, we planned a vacation, and went to Florida for a week, and he said it was the worst hell I've ever been through in my life. All my wife did was scream and fuss and holler. She cried. She didn't like anything. And I thought, she's been looking forward to this to a year. Why is she acting like that? Well, come to find it out, it was that time of the month. And he said the next week we got home and all she did was brag on the vacation. I thought, dear Lord, she's another woman. So if you want to help your companion, if you want to help one another, and especially with your time together, is find out, because the woman basically knows, and plan your time around that. I know sometimes that's not possible to do, but if possible, it makes for a better time. If you've planned time to get away, plan it with a good time, the time when her body is not experiencing that. But men, you need to understand there are times that your wife goes through these things. And I know in the life of my wife, I can tell the Friday before the week. You can literally, absolutely tell there is a drastic change that happens in her. Pam is just one of those that has had to have not medical help, but she's had to make some adjustments on what she ate, on her caffeine, because it affects her body. And women, if you go through a very hard time and you have that drastic change, there are some things that you can do that will help you in eating, in doing away completely with caffeine, etc. And it will help you not to have the sort of like that boiling feeling, that real sensation that women know about during that particular time, and may make your moods a little easier for your husband. And again, there are women that we have met. We have friends that the wife never goes through this. I mean, it's just like a normal week to them. And men need to thank God if they have that. But at the same time, there are others that have a very tough time with it. And so men have to be more compassionate, and that's something we men need to work on. Now, on the other side, let me talk to the wife for just a moment about this. And again, this is things that we need to discuss, we need to talk about, because it will help your marriage, because Satan will work in the area of communication and faithfulness, finances, and even in incompatibility to try to drive a wedge between you and your companion. A man is made to where he has a physical drive. Now, the woman just doesn't have this. A woman has to be touched and held and talked to for her sexual drive to be motivated. A man is totally different. Again, a man is moved by sight. Wives want to know why, when they're changing in the restroom in the morning, their husband just about attacks them. Well, that's how the man is made. It's not because your husband is weird. He's not some pervert. He's made this way to where he's moved by sight. And you need to thank God he's wanting to put his arms around you instead of some other woman. You need to be thankful that he feels that way about you. I think sometimes women don't appreciate the fact that their husband actually feels that way about them, and they need to appreciate that. But a man's drive, from the time a man is about 16 years of age to about 20 years of age, his drive reaches a peak during that time. From about 35 to 40 years of age, there is somewhat of a decline. Then when he gets 50-ish, that drive begins to kick in again. Now, a woman, though, from the time she's about 15 to the time she's about 30, 32, 35, depending on the age, doesn't have necessarily a tremendous drive. Some do. Again, this is not everyone. I'm not trying to make this the whole thing. This is just a generality here. But when she gets to be about 32 to 35, her drive kicks in. Now, what's funny is when the husband's drive is kicking out, the wife's drive is kicking in. What God has done there, though, is he has placed a balance there. And I don't want to talk about the balance, but God knew what he was doing when he made us that way, because he's putting the balance there. Because if the man's drive is kicking out, then the woman's drive is kicking in, then it balances out. Whereas when the woman doesn't have her drive as strong, the man's drive is stronger. So see, God has made this to where we balance one another out. Here's the point I want to make. There is a substance that it flows through a man's body every 72 hours, and it signals the brain that he is ready to have sexual relations, in this case with his companion, with his wife. And this will happen somewhere between every 3 to every 4 days. So your husband is going to have the desire to have relations with you 2, maybe 3 times a week. Conservatively 2 times, probably 3 times a week, because his body is going to be telling him he needs that. Now, let me share this with you, and I'm going to be very blunt here, because I want to try to help people who are listening to me. When a woman looks at her husband and says these words, and I don't counsel people, but I've heard a couple talk about this, and the husband has come to me and says, she said this to me, it just killed me. When a wife looks at her husband and says, all you want is sex, you will destroy that man. You affect that man's spirit and affect that man's heart, because his body is desiring that, but he's wanting to be with you. And what you have done is you have put up a major barrier and a major wall. Now, let me tell you what will happen. if when that man comes to you and has that desire, the Bible teaches that our bodies are not our own, that my body belongs to my wife, my wife's body belongs to me, and when I have a need, she helps fill it, but when she has a need, I help fill it. It works both ways. There are times when she may not want to have relations, but she does it to fulfill my need. There are times when I may not want the relations, but maybe her body is telling her she has the need to fulfill it. And I'm talking to couples now who are out there, husbands and wives, who need to hear this. The worst thing a woman can do is say, all you want is sex. All you want, and snap back. Let me tell you what will happen. You will crush that man and cause him to lose the desire to be with you. And that should never, ever come out of your mouth. And, a group of women were talking. One woman said one time, she said, well, my husband must be a pervert because that's all he wants. That's a terrible, terrible thing to say. You need to be thankful that your husband has a desire for you and that he's not, some deadbeat out there that's running around on you that doesn't care about you, or that he's not interested at all whatsoever in taking care of your needs. Now, this is very important because this is where the devil gets into more homes and causes separation. And there are men that their wives have become very frigid on them. Listen to what the Bible says. 1 Corinthians 7:5. Defraud you not one another, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayers and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency, or the inconsistency, or whatever you want to say there. That what he's trying to tell you is very important. He's trying to tell you here that don't defraud one another physically or sexually, except you do it with consent, to give yourselves over to fasting and prayer, and then come together again lest Satan tempt you. Men especially go under an extreme sexual temptation, mental temptation, if the wife becomes, I'm going to use the term frigid, and won't have anything to do with him. You're going to put the man in temptation. So, these husbands that go out and mess up sometimes, people say, oh, I don't know how he could do that. He's got such a pretty wife. Well, you don't know what that wife was like. You don't know what she said or did that may have put him under pressure. And I'm not trying to downgrade the woman and build up the man or justify anything here. Please don't get me wrong in reading what I'm saying. At the same time, when a husband is cold and callous and mean, and the wife, ends up separating from him, you got to understand she put up with as much sometimes as she can put up with. And again, we're not justifying separation. What I'm saying to you is, if we understand each other, if we understand the biological differences, if we understand how we are made, and if we understand the strategies of the devil, we won't have to go through the separation. We won't have to go through if both will cooperate together. It takes two to do it. One person can't make a good marriage. It takes both understanding each other, both cooperating with each other, and both doing the thing that is right. All right? Now, to keep that wife happy, to keep her happy, just shower her with attention. Let her know she's the best thing that ever happened, in the good time and in the bad time. Now, women, listen to this very carefully. I'm going to do something here that's going to be a little unusual. The Bible says the children of this world are much wiser than the children of light. Now, that's a strange statement that's made in the New Testament. But if you'll go to Proverbs chapter 7, verse 12 through 18, you will read how, and listen to me very carefully, a woman seduces a man. And you may be saying, boy, Brother Stone, what are you talking about this for? I'm going to show you something here. In Proverbs chapter 7, beginning at verse 12, this is what the Bible says. She waited for him. Verse 13, she caught him and kissed him. Verse 16, she decked her bed with tapestry and fine linens. Verse 17, she perfumed it with cinnamon and aloes. Verse 18, she says to him, let's fill ourselves with love till the morning. Now listen to me very carefully. You don't have to do this every day, once a week, whatever. When your husband comes home, especially if you have children, if you can have one day a week, that's just your day. If you can do it, sometimes it's impossible, but send the kids over to Grandma and Granddad's house, or send them over to spend the night with somebody. Just one day a week. And when he comes in the house, or after you get through eating, you've waited for him, you've grabbed him around the neck and held onto him and kissed him. You've decked the bed with tapestry and fine linens. You've got perfume. You fill the house with perfume. And you say, hey, listen, guy, this is my night with you. Wives, if he is a normal man, he won't be able to wait to get home, and he won't be able to be with you. And that time together bonds you. It bonds you together. You've got to have bonding time. You have got to keep each other happy. And something that my wife and I try to do, and I'm telling you something, with our schedule, the way we live, we're in church almost every night, or when we're at home, we're at the office, but we've tried to do this. to where we date each other. We take each other out on a date. We send Jonathan, and you know, Jonathan is the only child I know that goes to work with his mother and father. I mean, he's here at the office all day long while we're working. He's at home. He has some children here that he plays with that sometimes come over to the office, or he goes over to their house. So we've got to send him, you know, to Barb's house to be with our secretary's 3 girls or whatever, but somewhere. But anyway, we try to keep the romance in there. Send her some roses. Send her a nice card. You'd be surprised. It may not do a lot for you, sir. You know, you may think, well, this is just a waste of time, but it will affect her. It will do something for her. Listen, that's how you won her. That's how you got her. That's how she decided to marry you. You showered her with roses. You took her out to a restaurant to eat. You drove her around, you know. You sent her a card. You called her on the phone and told her how you miss her. That's how you won her. That's how you're going to keep her. That's how you're going to keep her happy. But the female wants romance in her marriage. She wants to go out on a date every now and then, you know. And I remember that a few years ago that the Lord gave me a song for my wife. Some of you heard it at camp meeting. And there's a line in it that says, we may be 2 heads, but we still got 1 heart. And I want you beside me till death do his part. And I still feel that way after all these years that Pam and I have been married. You know, your marriage matures. It grows. Your relationship grows. Your dependency on one another grows. You know, I mean, when I have to go somewhere and she's not around, I just miss her. And she really misses me. And we by no means have had a perfect marriage. I don't think anyone will ever really have a perfect marriage, but it can be perfected. The flaws can get out of it if you will allow it to do so. Now, before I go into the 6 lies that will sabotage your marriage, I want to talk for just a moment about an experience. When we did this tape, I decided to share this with the people, and I'm going to have to continue this on the other side, but I want to begin here talking about the importance of attention. There are several things that women really need. And I want to say this. I was married to Pam in 1982, and I knew Pam, but I didn't know how a woman felt or a woman thought. I knew Pam. I knew what Pam looked like. I knew what Pam wore to church. I knew what Pam liked to eat. But to know what the deep part of a woman, I did not know that. And I studied this. And I studied this after Pam and I went through a rift that I'm going to tell you about. There's several things that women need. They need security. They need to feel like that they're number 1. Number 2, they need romance. Sex is not romance. They need to be romanced. And number 3, they've got to have attention. Some time back, several years ago now, Pam and I went through a rift in our relationship. We'd been happily married for years. The baby was born, and this happens to a lot of families after they have their first child. The baby was born. All the attention was at that point on the little guy, and I loved him. I loved him to pieces. I loved to show him off. I loved him with me. But all the attention was on the little guy. Pam had gone through a chemical change in her body that it took her about 8 months to a year to really come out of. It was just a rough time for her personally. And so I got caught up in what I was doing. I got so caught up in the ministry, in the work of the ministry. I got caught up with friendships and relationships with friends and just a lot going on. And so what was happening was I was showing her almost no attention. I'd show the baby attention, but I wasn't showing Pam a lot of attention. I would leave early in the morning, go to a church, stay all day long, even take my clothes with me to change in, to study and pray, because you know I used to pray in the bedroom at the parsonage, but now the baby's there and he's sleeping, so I can't pray. So I'm spending all my time at the church. Well, this is building up in her. She feels like I'm not there for the baby and I'm not there for her. And it built up over a period of months. Well, one day, she just exploded and she said, I will not live. And I said, live like what? And she says, live this way. You're showing attention to everything and everybody else. I do not have your attention. You're always living at the church. And she was absolutely correct and absolutely right. Well, that day I said something to her that I never will forget. And it crushed her. I said, listen, if you die tomorrow, I'm going to go on with the ministry because I did it without you before and I can do it without you again. Now, really in my heart, I didn't mean that. In my heart of hearts, she said out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaking. But in my heart of hearts, I didn't mean it. I was upset. I was angry. I was upset at I didn't feel like she understood the ministry. She didn't understand the burden I was carrying. And it crushed her to the point that for several weeks, I could just see it in her. She just got quiet. She got still, And God literally whipped me. And let me tell you what I did. I sat down and said to myself, that was a stupid statement to make. How valuable is this woman in your life? And then what I did is I made a list. She cleans the house, does the dry cleaning, picks up the groceries, handles the airline tickets, handles the music for the music company, does all the payroll, all the taxes, all the insurance, balances the books for 4 ministry checkbooks and then our personal ministry checkbook. As I said, pays the bills, washes the clothes, packs the clothes for revival, cooks the food, raises my boy, irons, goes shopping. Goodness sakes. I listed, these are just a few things, runs the tape table, runs the tapes during the revival, packs and unpacks during the revival, corrects the magazine, answers personal letter, personal mail. Plus, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's my lover, she's my best friend. And I thought to myself, friend, you can't do without that woman.